Hey everyone, welcome back to Unfiltered and Unapologetic. I'm your host, Caitlin Gil-Soto, Dominicana, born and raised in Lawrence, Massachusetts, while spending my summers between Bani y El Cibao. I grew up between two worlds, one filled with music, faith, plátano with salami, and summers in the DR, and another full of silence, taboos, and that heavy question, what will people say? This is the space where we unlearn silence, where we choose softness without shame and name what our culture taught us to bury. Here, we speak the truth with clarity, tenderness, and always with that Dominican sazon that makes us who we are. You ever notice how sometimes the biggest obstacle in your life isn't other people? It's you. Not because you don't want better, not because you're not capable, but because somewhere along the way, you learned to cut off your own blessings before they could even land. That's self-sabotage. And it's sneaky. It dresses up as protecting yourself, but what it's really doing is repeating the same cycles that once kept you safe but now keep you small. If you heard episode 11, Struggle Love Ain't Sacred, you know we talked about how our culture taught us to romanticize pain in relationships, to see suffering as proof of love. Today, we're taking that conversation deeper because self-sabotage is like an invisible thread that runs through every part of life: love, friendships, family, and even your job. In Dominican culture, it shows up in ways we don't even question. We laugh it off, we call it, that's just how I am, or we act like being hard on ourselves is just being realistic. But the truth is, if we keep tripping over the same stone, maybe the problem isn't the stone. Maybe it's that we've gotten used to walking with our eyes closed. This episode is about opening those eyes because self-sabotage doesn't just cost you relationships. It costs you peace, joy, opportunities, and the future you've been praying for. Self-sabotage isn't just procrastination. It isn't just messing things up on purpose. It's an unconscious pattern, a defense mechanism in your mind that was created years ago, usually when you were too young to even understand what was happening, to keep you safe from pain, rejection, disappointment, or abandonment. It's when your present self wants something, but your past self is still running the show. You say you want love, but you push people away the minute they get close. You say you want a better job, but you forget to submit the application. You say you want peace, but you stir the pot when life finally gets calm. And here's the part that's hard to swallow. Self-sabotage often feels normal. In Dominican households, survival habits get passed down like family recipes. We learn to stay ready for the worst because that's how our parents and grandparents stayed alive, literally and emotionally. Maybe your abuela taught you not to expect too much so you wouldn't get your hopes crushed. Maybe your mom told you to be strong and never depend on anyone, so now you can't relax into receiving help. Or maybe you grew up hearing, that's too good to be true. And now every time something good happens, you scan it for hidden flaws. The thing is, those habits might have protected you once, but now they're keeping you from what you prayed for. I have a journal prompt here for you guys. When was the last time I pulled away from something I wanted because it felt too good to be true? And the affirmation for this question is, I am safe to receive without suspicion. As I mentioned in episode 11, we talked about how Dominican culture romanticizes struggle in love, how chaos gets mistaken for passion and pain gets dressed up as proof of loyalty. Self-sabotage is the quiet partner to that story. It's what happens when you've learned to crave what hurts and reject what heals. Even when you say you want a healthy, peaceful love, there's a part of you that feels unsafe without the highs and the lows. It can look like choosing partners who are emotionally unavailable because it keeps you chasing instead of being still. Picking fights when things are going too well because you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Turning down or walking away from someone who genuinely treats you with respect because it feels boring compared to the chaos you're used to. In our culture, it's reinforced everywhere. The bachata lyrics glorifying dying for love. The novelas where love is screaming 1 minute and kissing the next. The family advice that says, marriage isn't easy, so you have to just endure, without teaching the difference between normal challenges and emotional abuse. When you've been taught that love must be survived instead of enjoyed, peace can feel foreign. And if peace feels foreign, you'll find ways to ruin it. Not because you don't want to love, but because your nervous system doesn't recognize safety without struggle. I have a journal prompt here. When has a healthy relationship felt uncomfortable to me, and why? And the affirmation for this question is, I choose a love that feels safe, not a love that I have to survive. Self-sabotage doesn't just show up in romance. It creeps into our friendships too. And because friendships aren't always seen as serious relationships in our culture, the ways we damage them often goes unnoticed or get excused. It can look like pulling away when you're struggling instead of leaning on your friends, then feeling abandoned when they stop checking in, not celebrating a friend's wins because you feel like you're falling behind, avoiding deep conversations because you don't want to seem weak or dramatic, being overly defensive when a friend gives you feedback so they stop being honest with you. In our culture, there's a pride thing that runs deep. Many of us grew up hearing, la ropa sucia se lava en la casa, or the dirty clothes gets washed at home, which teaches us to keep struggles private, even from people who care about us. We're also raised in tight-knit communities where gossip can spread fast, so trusting friends with vulnerable parts of our story can feel risky. The result? You keep friendships on the surface, never letting them see the real you, and then wonder why you feel lonely even with people around. That's self-sabotage, protecting yourself so much that you block every connection you crave. You might trust one person, but if your cousin's friend overhears a detail, suddenly your whole block knows your business. There's also the I can handle it alone mentality that gets passed down. Our parents and grandparents lived through tough times, migration, political unrest, poverty, and many didn't have the luxury of emotional openness. They modeled endurance, not vulnerability. So when you're going through something heavy, you might disappear instead of reaching out, thinking you're protecting the friendship when you're really just starving it. And then there's jealousy, a word people hate to admit, but one that's very real in every culture. Dominican pride can make it hard to clap for someone if you feel behind in your own life. Instead of talking about those feelings or letting them pass, you might pull back, throw subtle shade, or avoid them until the friendship quietly fades. Then comes the test of loyalty. We often play without realizing it. We expect that, quote unquote, real friends should just know when something's wrong, and we pull away or shut down when they don't show up exactly how we imagined. It's the same thing we sometimes do in romantic relationships, expecting our partner to magically sense what's bothering us without us saying a word, and then resenting them for it for not reading our minds. The truth is, people can't meet needs they don't know exist. And finally, there's the tension between group loyalty and personal growth. In many Dominican friend groups, if you're starting to change, going to therapy, setting boundaries, chasing bigger goals, the people who knew you in your old patterns may feel left behind. You'll hear things like te está cotizando, or you think you're better than us, or ya tú no eres la misma, or you've changed. And instead of risking the friendship, you shrink yourself, which is self-sabotage in disguise. You're choosing the comfort of the group over the friendships your healed self actually needs. The result? You keep friendships on the surface, never letting them see the real you, and then wonder why you feel lonely even when people are around. That's self-sabotage. Protecting yourself so much that you block the very connection you crave. I have a journal prompt here for you guys. Where have I pulled away from a friendship instead of being honest about what I was feeling? And the affirmation for this question is, I allow myself to be seen and supported by the people I trust. If there's one place self-sabotage hides in plain sight for Dominicans, it's inside family roles and expectations. Because in our culture, family isn't just important, it's everything. We grow up hearing, la familia es primero, or family goes first. Uno para todos y todos para uno, or one for one of us and everything for everyone. And en las buenas y en las malas, or in the good and in the bad. And while there's beauty in loyalty, there's danger in loyalty without boundaries. Self-sabotage in family dynamics often looks like taking on roles that drain you, like the fixer, the provider, and the peacemaker, even when they harm your mental health. Saying yes to family demands out of guilt, even when it costs you your rest, your money, or your peace. Avoiding boundaries because you fear being labeled as malagradecida o egoísta, or selfish and ungrateful. Putting your own goals on hold to meet the needs of everyone else first. For many Dominicans, this starts young. If you were the oldest daughter, you may have been expected to raise your siblings while your parents worked. If you were a good kid at school, maybe you became the translator at the bank, the lawyer at the immigration office, the problem solver at every government agency. Without realizing it, you learned that your value came from what you could do for everyone else. And here's the tricky part. In our families, sacrifice is often celebrated more than self-care. If you say you can't attend a family event because you're tired, you'll hear, what are you tired for? You don't even have any kids. If you don't lend money because you're saving for something, you might get, if you don't help your family, then who will? That pressure can push you to overextend yourself again and again, even at the cost of your own well-being. But self-sabotage in family doesn't always come from direct requests. Sometimes it comes from silent expectations. No one says that you have to do this, but it's just understood. You're always the one to host holidays, call everyone on their birthday, or step in when a crisis hits. You don't question it because that's just what you do. But every time you do it out of obligation instead of desire, you chip away at your own energy. There's also the comparison sibling effect. Maybe you've heard, oh, your brother is always there for the family, or your sister always helps your mom. Those comparisons push you to overperform so you're not seen as the selfish or disappointing one. The problem is your worth gets tied to a scoreboard you never agreed to play on. And for some, there's the role of the emotional gatekeeper, the one who keeps the peace, mediates every fight, and makes sure everyone is talking. It sounds noble, but it's exhausting. You end up protecting the family's emotional stability at the cost of your own, bottling up your feelings so no one else feels uncomfortable. Self-sabotage isn't about malice. It's about the fear of losing love or connection if you put yourself first. But love that only exists when you overgive isn't love. It's conditional approval. And the cost is high. Resentment, burnout, and a life that feels like it's always on pause. I have a journal prompt here for you guys. What family role have I taken on that no longer supports my growth or peace? The affirmation for this question is, I can love my family without abandoning myself. Self-sabotage doesn't just live in our personal lives. It thrives in our careers too. And for many Dominicans, work isn't just about making a living. It's about survival, reputation, and proving that the sacrifices our families made were worth it. We grow up hearing, hay que matarse trabajando, or you have to work yourself to the bone. El que madruga, Dios lo ayuda, or God helps those who wake up early. El trabajo duro habla por ti, or hard work speaks for you. These sayings do carry truth, but they can also become chains. Because when hard work becomes the only measure of worth, rest feels like laziness, and ambition turns into overwork. Until your body, your mental health, and your relationships start paying the price. Self-sabotage shows up as overcommitting so no one questions your dedication even when your plate is already full, staying in a toxic job because you don't want to be seen as ungrateful for the opportunity, turning down promotions or new roles because you're scared that you won't be ready even when you're overqualified, saying yes to every task because you're afraid boundaries will make you seem difficult. For first-generation Dominicans especially, there's an added weight. You're not just working for yourself. You're carrying your family's pride, financial needs, and often their unfulfilled dreams. If your parents worked 12-hour shifts in factories, cleaned houses, or stood on their feet all day, you might feel guilty even thinking about leaving a stable job, even if it's killing you. That's the root of success guilt. When your work conditions are better than your parents ever had, it can feel wrong to enjoy them. You might overwork to earn your blessings, take on extra tasks you don't need to, or stay in a role you've outgrown because you don't want to seem ungrateful. And you've probably heard the phrases, you have it easier, or take advantage and work hard because you don't know what it really means to struggle. Then there's the immigrant hustle mentality. Our families taught us to take any opportunity and make the most of it because they didn't have the privilege to wait for the perfect fit. The problem is that the same mindset can keep you in jobs that don't value you or chasing titles that just to prove that you're somebody, while neglecting the bigger picture of your happiness. And it's funny because I'm actually going through this right now at my job. And here is another subtle pattern. Discomfort with ease. If you've grown up in survival mode, work that feels too easy can feel wrong. A calm, balanced job can make you anxious, like you're not doing enough, and that discomfort can push you to overcommit, chase unnecessary stress, or even leave a good situation because it doesn't feel like work. Then there's imposter syndrome, the quiet, constant whispers that says you don't belong where you are. This has been my life lately. It can make you shrink in meetings, second guess your ideas, or avoid opportunities you're more than qualified for because you fear being exposed as a fraud. For Dominicans, it's amplified by being one of the few or the only person in the room who looks like you, talks like you, or comes from your background. You might hear people or sometimes family say, "What are you even doing there?" Or "You're too young for that." Or "This is for people with more experience." So people belittle your experience just because you're younger than them. Instead of seeing your position as earned, you convince yourself it's a fluke. And then you work yourself into exhaustion trying to prove that you deserve it. The danger, the constant pressure doesn't just steal your joy. It pushes you toward burnout and keeps you from taking risks that can actually help you grow. And just like in relationships, there's the you should know trap there too. We expect our bosses to notice our hard work and reward us without us having to advocate for ourselves. But in reality, staying silent and hoping to be recognized often leads to being overlooked, which we then interpret as proof that we are not good enough, feeding the cycle. Self-sabotage at work isn't just missing out on promotions. It's working so hard to prove your worth that you burn yourself out before you can ever enjoy the life that you're building. The journal prompt for this section is, where am I overworking to prove something instead of building a life I actually want? And the affirmation for this question is, my value is not measured by exhaustion. By now, you might be thinking, okay, but why do I keep doing this to myself? Why do I push away good love? Why do I disappear when friendships get deep? Why do I let my family's needs drown out my own? Why do I overwork until I can barely think straight? The short answer, because at some point these patterns kept you safe. The long answer, they became your normal. Self-sabotage is rarely ever about laziness or lack of desire. It's about the way your mind, body, and spirit learn to survive in the environments you grew up in and how Dominican culture shaped that survival. Many of us were raised in homes where endurance was celebrated more than peace. We watched our parents and grandparents push through exhaustion, swallow their feelings, and keep going because stopping wasn't an option. We heard phrases like, "You can hold on a little longer." God gives his toughest battles to his strongest warriors. As long as there's life, there's struggle. Those words were meant to inspire strength, but they also taught us that rest was weakness, that boundaries were selfish, and that calm was suspicious. On a biological level, your nervous system became trained to function in survival mode. When you've lived in a constant state of adapting, bracing for the next crisis, or proving your worth, your body starts to confuse chaos with safety. Stillness feels dangerous. Peace feels like the calm before the storm. So when life is finally calm, your body looks for the next fire to put out. And if it can't find one, it creates one. Culturally, Dominican households often mix love with sacrifice. You prove your worth by how much you endure, how much you give, how much you can take without breaking. So when life feels too easy, too good, or too peaceful, a voice inside says, I haven't earned this yet. That's why self-sabotage comes dressed up as protection. But really, it's the lock on the cage you've outgrown. Unlearning self-sabotage isn't about fixing yourself. It's about teaching your mind and body that you're safe to live differently. So the first way you can do this is notice without judgment. When you feel the urge to start a fight, cancel plans, overcommit, pause and say, this is my old pattern showing up. Awareness is a first step to choice. The next one is question the belief. Ask, if I wasn't afraid, what would I choose here? Or what would my healed self do? This breaks the autopilot mold. The third is to start small. Pick one area, maybe accepting a compliment without deflecting or saying no to something without over-explaining. Every small win teaches your nervous system that safety doesn't have to come with struggle. The fourth one, let peace feel awkward. The first time you let a day be quiet or let a healthy relationship stay steady, it will feel strange. That's not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign you're rewiring what safe feels like. Replace earning with receiving. Instead of working yourself to the bone to deserve good things, start practicing receiving without repayment. This could be letting someone help you, accepting rest without guilt, or celebrating a win without moving the goalpost. Remember, you can't think your way out of a pattern that was built through experience. You have to live your way out of it, choice by choice, moment by moment. The journal prompt for this section is, what small act of receiving or resting can I practice this week, even if it feels uncomfortable? The affirmation for this question is, I am safe to receive without proving, performing, or overgiving. Self-sabotage doesn't just affect your relationships, your career, or your mental health. It can quietly erode your spirituality. When you keep choosing what you know will hurt you, even if it's familiar, you start to break your trust with yourself. And that break can make it harder to trust God. In Dominican culture, faith is woven into our daily life. We say, si Dios quiere, or God willing, without even thinking. We go to church on Sundays, light candles for our loved ones, pray over our coffee in the morning. But here's the hard truth. You can believe in God and still be blocking what He's trying to give you. Because your habits, your fears, and your comfort with struggle keep rejecting His blessings before they even arrive. Sometimes self-sabotage is staying in the wrong relationship because you think, at least I'm not alone. Sometimes it's ignoring the opportunity you prayed for because you don't feel worthy yet. And sometimes it's convincing yourself you already know how things will end, so you don't even let yourself try. That last one, it's not discernment. It's fear dressed as wisdom. Florence Scovel Shinn wrote, "Your word is your wand. If you speak defeat, you call defeat. If you speak life, you call life." But here's the thing. Your actions have to match your words. You can't pray for peace while making choices that keep you in chaos. You can't ask for God for a healthy love while entertaining the same dynamics that broke you last time. Breaking self-sabotage is an act of faith. It's telling God, I trust you more than I trust my patterns. It's choosing to walk toward the unknown. Not because it's easy, but because you believe His plan for you is bigger than what you've already lived. And when you do that, when your choices align with your prayers, you don't just feel lighter, you start to feel held. And we're going to do a closing prayer. Put your hand on your chest and let's take a deep breath. And exhale. Dear God, today I choose trust over patterns. I choose to believe that your plan is bigger than my fears, my habits, and the ways I've sabotaged myself before. I lay down every thought that tells me I am not ready, not worthy, not enough, because you already said I am. I thank you for the opportunities I almost turned away from, and I ask you to give me the courage to walk toward them this time. Let my words speak life, and let my actions match my prayers. If I ever try to run back to what broke me, close that door for good. If I start doubting what you've already placed in my spirit, remind me of your promises. I declare that I receive peace without chaos, love without suffering, success without burnout. I align my steps with blessings you've had waiting for me all along. And I thank you in advance because I know as I choose you over my patterns, my life will reflect the freedom I've prayed for. Amen. So we talked about self-sabotage, not as a flaw in your character, but as a pattern your nervous system learned to survive. We named it in our relationships, in our work, in our friendships, and even in how we talk to ourselves. We traced it through our Dominican culture, the ways we confuse love with endurance, how we silence our needs to avoid drama, and how we stay loyal to suffering because it feels familiar. But we also broke it down to this truth. Patterns can be unlearned, habits can be replaced, and your future does not have to repeat your past. You get to set boundaries without guilt. You get to choose love without struggle. You get to say yes to opportunities without waiting for the catch. You get to speak life into your goals instead of talking yourself out of them. And above all, you get to remember this. Self-sabotage is not who you are. It's just what you've practiced. And now you get the chance to practice something different. If this episode spoke to you, go back to listen to episode 11. Struggle love ain't sacred, because these two conversations go hand in hand. Together, they are your permission to slip, to stop making pain a part of your identity and start making peace your new normal. If you loved today's conversation, you could support Unfiltered and Unapologetic through Buzzsprout by making a monthly contribution. It helps keep this space deep, intentional, research driven, so I can keep bringing you the kind of conversations our community needs. Follow me on Instagram at Caitlin La Jefa with 2 A's at the end and at Unfilled and Unapologetic Pod to continue the conversation. The podcast is available on all platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and more. And please share this episode with someone who's been stuck in a cycle of self-sabotage, who's ready to choose peace over patterns, or who just needs to hear that they're not broken. They're simply ready to heal. Thank you for healing out loud with me. See you in the next episode.